Hello, this is Bob McClellan. I'm one of the developers on PowerTools, and I'm going to today show you the organization for the new version 2.2. As an example, I'm going to look at set open XML Watermark. I have a PowerShell window open. I'm going to go ahead and execute that. I can look in my results, and here is the new document that was created, and it has the watermark on it. So how did that happen? Let's take a look at the actual code. So here is the code for the commandlet to set open XML watermark, and the main functionality is in the insert watermark method that actually modifies the document. You can see it takes parameters for the document, the text, and whether or not it's a diagonal orientation. The Commandlet code is organized in a series of modules under the Commandlets folder in the project. You can see they're all in there. There's one of these for each commandlet, plus the OpenXML commandlet module has the common code for those, which I'll show you in a minute. These they call methods in what we call the core code, and the core code is entirely independent of the commandlet infrastructure and commandlet processing, and those are all in these classes in the classes folder. Any of that code can be used independently in your own programs if that's what you want to do, or you can make new commandlets with it or whatever you want to do with it. It's set up so that it can be run without the commandlet structure, which was not true in version 1 of PowerTools. So how do the commandlets work? Well, the main job of the commandlet is to get the parameters and pass them into the core code. And one of the main things that we want to be able to do, if I go back to my PowerShell, is when I type in one of my commandlets, I want to be able to use a wildcard. And so then you can see it created a new document for each of the source documents. They all get processed in one shot. So that's very easy to do in a commandlet, but even though it's easy to do, I made it even easier by creating a common subclass or base class called the PowerTools modifier commandlet. Now in this case, set open XML watermark is modifying the document, so it uses the modifier base class, and it's handling parameters for documents or a list of file names, so the documents can either be passed in through the pipeline or named as files. Then it also handles the output. Since it's a modifier, there's going to be an output, and that can either be done to an output folder or passed through to the pipeline, or both. It can also not be sent to an output folder, in which case it would be overwriting the original document, which is not, I don't recommend doing that most times. Those parameters are defined here. Here's the pipeline documents, which come through as OpenXML PowerTools document objects, and I'll go over what that is later. Otherwise, we have positional argument, with the first one being the file name or file names, which can be comma separated and wildcarded, and that's all handled in here. The second positional parameter is the output folder, where it'll go after it's modified, and then there's a simple switch parameter for the pass-through. And so then this all documents makes all the commandlet calls to properly generate that list. That list is done with a lazy evaluation. You see the yield returns here for an IEnumerable of all those documents. The file names are also, if you specify a file name, it's read in and changed into this OpenXML PowerTools document object again. And then here's, so this is the file name part. Here's the pipe version. And then the other important method here is the output document, and that takes an open XML PowerTools document again as the object, and it figures out whether to write it out, pass it through, or overwrite. And that's pretty straightforward, but it's nice to have this code handled in one place. So now going back, I can show you exactly what's happening here. So we have our for each on the results from that all documents. That will cause it to go through every document that was specified one at a time. We put in a try and catch here so that if an error occurs on one of the documents, it doesn't stop processing on the rest of them. In addition, PowerTools has a specific way of writing out errors. Write error uses the getExceptionErrorRecord method, which is a static method, to format whatever exception it is in a way that is can be passed to this write error method for the commandlet. So it gives a good descriptive error on that exception. So the parameters, we already had the first two positional parameters on modifier commandlet, you can see here, and so the next two positional ones are the watermark text, and well, there's one positional parameter, and then the switch for whether or not it's diagonal. So you can see we have in the base, there's everything we need for the input and output of documents, and then in the specific class we have everything we need to actually apply the modification. And that all comes together here in this loop, and this check here is making sure that the document is a word processing markup language document, WML, so that since the insert watermark only works on that type, and we're going to cast it to that type in the call. Next, I've shown you the commandlet level. Oh, one more thing about the commandlets you may have noticed. I probably haven't shown this yet. The namespace for the commandlets is all OpenXML PowerTools.commands. All of the core code is in just the OpenXML PowerTools namespace. You can see here. And the insert watermark uses a standard method of operating on a word processing document that makes sure that it is always closed properly before it's over. I'm going to go over this in more detail when I show you the code, the common code or the core code for OpenXML PowerTools document. But this is a pattern that you'll see throughout the core code, where we create an OpenXML memory stream document from the WML document. Then from that we can create a word processing document that we need in order to actually use the OpenXML SDK, because that is the appropriate object for that. Then the processing is done here. When we're outside of the using block for the word processing document, we can then return the stream.doc call getModifiedDocument that converts it back from essentially from a memory stream into the OpenXML PowerTools document type. In order to easily pipe documents from one commandlet to another without having issues with having the file still open, which would be the case if we tried to pipe a word processing document or a spreadsheet document object. Instead, we use this structure here with the document byte array, which is just a plain old byte array, and the file name that the document had when it was read, if it was read from a file. That may be null if this object was created without a file name, but most times we get it from a file name, as you can see here. and all it does is read all the bytes and then determine the type so that it can return one of the derived document types, WML document, SML document, or PML document if it's one of those. Or we also have the case where it's a package. That's used very seldom, but it does come into play, for example, with the get and set open XML themes, because the theme is a package. But that allows us to put some strong typing on these based on what the actual document type is. So that's a static function that creates the object in the first place. We can also do the same thing from a document. If we get a generic OpenXML PowerTools document, then we'll create the specific derived class, or derived object, WML, SML, or PML. Now the real fun tricks come into play. I'm going to skip most of this when we get down to the stream document. So the purpose of the stream document is to move that byte array into a memory stream and hold that until it has been finished processing in the SDK. So it'll either be processed as a read-only or as a read-write, but either way, the memory stream handles that. So the first method is to open the memory stream, and all it does is create a new memory stream, move the bytes over, and then try to open it as a package, which potentially could fail, and there's an exception for that. The next one we're going to look at is the get word processing document. And here all it has to do is check the document type to make sure it's good, and then it opens it from using the memory stream. The memory stream can be modified, and then if you want to get a modified, you can choose what object to actually make that modified document into. It could be an OpenXML PowerTools document or a WML document, etc. And the process is still the same except for the typing. Then returns the proper object. Created, fresh, and new. No connection to the file. So the other two types of commandlets are read-only, which is the first one in here, read-only commandlet. That can operate on lots of documents, but doesn't have the output portion. So it doesn't need a result, an output folder, or a pass-through. But it can take documents either through the pipeline or as file names, and has the same IEnumerable for all documents, but no output. Then the other type is the create. So create brand new documents from something else, and these are done for things, not very many, like the export open XML spreadsheet, export open XML word processing, create brand new documents. Those documents can go directly to a file, or they can be passed through, and the pass through is handled here. If it doesn't pass through, it saves it, and that document save has to you have to make sure that somehow the file name is specified on that new document, which you'll see if you look at the code for that. And then down here we have that exception error record creation that is important for making the commandlet error processing work the way it should. So to summarize, commandlets are, in this case, all of them are derived from one of the base commandlet types, in this case the modifier. That base commandlet determines the first one or two positional parameters and maybe a switch parameter. Then the specific commandlet enhances that with whatever it needs to perform, the function that it needs to perform. Most cases use a simple common processing loop to go through every document and use either output document for modifiers or some other processing loop, but still the output document for creates, and so on. That common or base class code is in OpenXML Commandlet. The core code is in one of these classes, all of which are just static method classes. They're never instantiated. And the document control is all down in this PT OpenXML document module. So I think that does it for this video, and I hope you enjoy the new version of PowerTools. Thanks.